I'm a bird, mother. I'm a bird.
Marathon in serious trouble as Sony and Bungie cancel marketing delay likely ... Am I surprised? No. So from what I saw last, what's been happening is they went from posting every single day, like basically spamming their timeline about everything they're working on, to completely radio silent ever since they got caught red-handed.
Yep.
They don't post anything anymore. So do I think they're gonna cancel the game? No. I think at this point it's too late to cancel the game.
Look, I've covered a lot of failed live services in my channel over the years, and I'm telling you, Marathon is following this trend just beat by beat. And unless there's a major overhaul or a major change of plans, I don't foresee this game really garnering a level of success that will allow it to be a long-term live service. And this goes doubly true with some recent developments. Now, already, we have talked about the fact that the reception surrounding the game itself has not been particularly positive, with trailers and whatnot garnering mixed reviews, with hands-on experiences not being as enthusiastic as you might hope they are for a new Bungie title. You've got the fact that player retention surrounding the game has not been great, with closed alphas highlighting a pattern of diminishing.
Yeah, because it's a really good example. What I've been saying, this game might be okay the first like couple of days, right? You spam a few queues with your buddies, but it's gonna get old really fast because there's nothing at stake, there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to research, there's nothing to prepare for. You load in, you shoot some things, you loot, you know all the prices of everything right away. There's no high stakes, there's nothing.
Diminishing players and diminishing viewership and just diminishing social media presence on major platforms like.
And also, it doesn't help that the attachments they have for the guns really heavily changes how your gun even operates. Let's say you have bad aim, they have attachments to basically improve your quote-unquote aim. So people who have been playing this for a very long time would be dunking on people who are just trying it out. As a person who would pay money to play it for the first time, that would genuinely feel like a slap in the face in the first place.
Twitch, and of course, the most recent controversy involving plagiarism has plagued the game's PR because, well, every time you look at the game, you can't help but wonder what's stolen and what isn't. And then on top of all that, you've got reports highlighting how morale at Bungie is at an all-time low or in free fall across all departments, with developers at Bungie stating to reporters that the vibes have never been worse, with concerns about what will happen to Bungie itself should Marathon bomb.
What happened with them saying on the live stream that they want to work with the artists that they ripped off? Have they even reached out to the artists? Because I haven't heard anything being mentioned besides that the audience has started financially supporting the artists because he or she barely had any money.
And it looks like that's the direction that this is headed in. Now, something else that this Forbes article reported was that Bungie pulled the plug on its main Marathon marketing plan, which was going to have a new trailer in June. The whole campaign needs to be reworked now. Beyond that, a public beta that was supposed to happen in August may have changed into a roadmap of public playtests. So plans are in flux, and it would seem as though there's no clear direction as to when and how this game will launch, especially in light of recent developments, highlighting just a certain kind of hostility towards the game and a certain level of disdain towards the game. And that finally brings us to the latest developments surrounding Marathon and the news that seem to indicate that this game is in for quite an uphill long-term journey. It would seem as though we might not see this game this year based on more news and more affirmations that marketing surrounding this game is just not.
We've seen this happen so often these days. Game gets backlash, they delay the game, dump even more money into it because of delays. Every single delay costs these companies millions. And when it finally drops, gaming journalists do damage control, insult the gamers for not buying or not supporting the game. In the end, the game is gonna flop, and the people who are gonna be blamed are people who just didn't want to spend their money on a game that genuinely is underperforming.
Going as originally planned and maybe altogether canceled. The following information was relayed by Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols. Currently, this episode of his podcast where he talked about this is paywalled on Patreon, but there's one specific quote that numerous news outlets picked up on from Colin Moriarty's reporting, and he's someone who has sources in the industry and is able to get information from folks who decide that they need to speak out about behind the scenes goings-ons. And so right here we have a Forbes article that kind of quoted Colin Moriarty on Sacred Symbols. He had the following to say about what he heard based on his own kind of research and him speaking to sources that he has at PlayStation. So here's the exact quote that's making tons of headlines. I was told by someone familiar with marketing plans in a key overseas market that there are now no plans to do paid marketing for a marathon at all. I don't know if those plans were affected by what has recently happened or if that was always the plan or whatever, but it is considered a fairly unusual move for a game of this high profile.
Not necessarily. There's quite a few games that didn't have marketing at all, it just dropped. Valorant is a really good example. It's a shooter game that just dropped and it took the world by storm. What's the other game by Steam?
That MOBA, the hero shooter, right?
Yeah. I forgot what the name was.
Deadlock.
Deadlock, yeah. A really good example is Deadlock. No real marketing, people just jumped on it.
So this is the second time we're hearing, the second report that has stated that marketing plans for Marathon have been scrapped altogether and will be reworked. So what that indicates is that this game will likely be delayed. And Paul Tassi from Forbes kind of hinted at this already with his reporting. And in this
Yet again, why are we listening to Tassi?
reporting of Colin Moriarty's report, Paul Tassi goes on to say that that was similar to what he was told when he spoke to folks at Bungie, whereas Colin Moriarty got his information from folks within Sony. Sony and Bungie being aligned due to the fact that Sony bought out Bungie. So the fact that we're getting sources from both within the development studio and the publishing side of things all saying the same things seems to indicate that there's validity to the situation. That
If I remember correctly, the reason why Sony even bought out Bungie was when they were still under the double CEO thing, when they had the North American CEO and they had the Japanese CEO, which we by now all of us know that the Japanese CEO had no idea what the North American CEO was even doing. And they effectively this year removed the second CEO from his position because he greenlight projects like Concord. He greenlight projects like buying out Bungie. He was doing some really ridiculous decisions, which genuinely their clientele, which are the gamers, did not understand or didn't want to even buy. Sony, from the North American development side, you have Concord, you have Eat the Rich, dumb game, and you have Marathon. This is a flop after flop after flop.
marketing for this game was scrapped, in part likely because of the plagiarism accusations that's forcing Bungie to essentially go through the entire game and see what was stolen and what wasn't, what was directly lifted from the original artist who exposed Bungie for plagiarism, and what stuff is actually original to Bungie. And then beyond that, there's just this general sense that nobody really is about this game. Nobody really likes this game. And then the plagiarism situation and controversy was kind of the final nail in the coffin. You know, it was already a precarious situation, but the trust and the goodwill surrounding Marathon, a game that already wasn't appealing to a lot of people, both on the Bungie side and on the extraction shooter side, the bad will that all of this has generated.
Like, Bungie already literally said, oh, D2 players, don't even bother. Like, Destiny players in general, don't even bother with this. This is PvP. You guys can only play PvE. This isn't a extraction game like Tarkov. It's like, To be fair, I don't know if they actually said the words like Tarkov, but isolating your possible clientele, it's not the way. You shouldn't be telling people not to buy your game because we already know how it ends. We had a lot of games that released like Dustborn, Veilguard, Avowed, where people were saying don't buy the game. And then you don't buy the game and they get mad at you with saying, why didn't you buy the game?
Has meant that people weren't even really willing to give Marathon a chance. And so all of this has culminated in a situation where most likely the game will have to be delayed in order for them to reassess how to market this game yet again, how to find ways to kind of spruce up the game in a way that will make it more appealing. And that way they have just better prospects for this title's, potential success. Though I think that even with a delay, it ultimately will not make much of a difference. I believe that the problems surrounding Marathon are on a foundational level. The plagiarism stuff, that only added fuel to the fire. But
Bungie in general is having a lot of issues right now. They released how they're planning to rework Destiny 2. It is basically a ripoff of Star Wars. Bungie in general is doing one bad decision after another. I have no idea if they changed the higher ups, the upper management, or their entire creative team, but every single decision they have been doing lately has been wrong.
just think that unless they make a different type of game altogether, this game really doesn't have a whole lot in terms of a chance for success. That is the thing that is just not appealing to a whole lot of people. And then you look at the art style, the one thing that people are like, that's kind of unique and appealing. And turns out that elements of that were taken from.
I don't remember people saying that it's unique and appealing. I only seen people dog on the art style and how it looks.
The first 1 minute of the trailer was brilliant. Then after that, it just went downhill. I don't know how you dropped the ball on that, but hey.
Artists who did not contribute to the game and who did not give permission for Bungie to use their assets. And you've got a situation where now.
And we also found out that the art director, he was following the artist. We watched it in another video as well, where it was verified that he was following the artist. And then you're saying you were not aware, and the artist under Bungie who sold the art has been fired. All of this is just weird.
No aspect of the game ultimately appeals to really anyone. And I mean, I want to highlight another situation, another live service that saw myriad delays. Suicide Squad killed the Justice League.
Oh my
This was
God.
coming from.
I hate that game. I hate that game. Our chat made me watch through the video of it, and oh my God. I think ever since then, I don't open videos that chat recommends on stream anymore.
Rocksteady, a very celebrated studio, right? Who created the Batman Arkham trilogy. And this is a game that initially had some kind of hype around it, and then people learned that it was a live service. So already once people learned that, there was a whole lot of trepidation surrounding this title. And then gameplay came out for the game, and it looked just so generic, even for a live service, that people were not really giving this game a whole lot in terms of hope that it will succeed. People were kind of a little turned off by the.
It's not appealing to people who play Destiny. It's not appealing to people who play extraction games. It's not appealing to people who are playing FPS games. Who is the target audience for that game? They won't even find out because the game is paywalled as well.
Direction that this game was taking. And so throughout the course of the development cycle of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, tons of delays happened. The game was delayed, I believe, 3 times. And, they used that time to polish things up. But what ultimately launched was a live service that felt really kind of incomplete. They didn't really wrap up a full arc of a story because they wanted to make sure that the story lasted for many, many seasons, because they wanted to recurrently monetize players and keep them engaged. And so the campaign experience just didn't feel as satisfying as it could have. And then beyond that, despite the delays, the core of the game was what people were turned off by. The skeleton of the game was what people weren't appealed by. And despite having the DC brand behind it, despite the Justice League being in there, despite villains like Joker and Harley Quinn and, iconic characters from the DC universe being used to market this game, it ultimately ended up being an utter flop, despite the myriad delays, despite them trying to, market this game as best they could. Because ultimately, a brand and an IP and characters can't carry an entire game, especially in the live service space, this market that's so oversaturated, where if you don't stand out, like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, where it just felt so generic in what it did and didn't really do anything better than other live service.
Yeah, the people had a problem with it not just because it was so generic and boring. People had a problem with it because long-standing fans of DC games, especially Batman games, felt pissed on. Being generic and boring would have been an upgrade from what it actually was.
Services, then what you ultimately get is a situation where the game really has no chance for success. You can just sense it. You can sense a lack of enthusiasm surrounding a game like this, and it feels like Marathon is going through a similar journey. Sure, they can delay it, but Marathon is still just Marathon. It is still that extraction shooter that doesn't really get extraction shooter right, or it doesn't have the bones and the meat to make it as appealing as something like Tarkov or as Hunt Showdown, which have become sort of de facto.
Yeah, because the problem is there is nothing at stake. There is no preparation. There is no research. There is nothing. You jump in, you loot, you see everything, how much it costs for you selling. There's literally nothing, no escalation happening in the game. It's an empty shell of a game.
De facto games in this genre that Marathon is trying to break into, but based on impressions that are out there,
just because there's not enough games in a specific genre like extraction doesn't mean you can take just any turd and throw it at the fan base and then we'll gobble it up. Also, because how little extraction games have as a variety, the fact that this is flopping so hard should be an indicator how big of a turd it actually is. Because extraction market is a very wide open.
a lot of people don't feel like Marathon does enough to stand out. The fact that it's charging $40 and isn't free to play, combined with just a lack of substantial content and it feeling feature incomplete, and it not feeling like it does anything new or unique or anything that surpasses the established norm. Even if the Bungie name is behind Marathon, even if, the creators of Destiny are
Bungie having Bungie behind a game means nothing. If anything, it will drag them down rather than put them up. Bungie has already besmirched its name a very long time ago.
Are the ones shipping this. That's no guarantee of success, in the same way that you could tag a game with the Marvel brand on it, like Marvel's Avengers, and it can still flop because if the game does not look appealing and if it's not ultimately fun to play, or if it doesn't do what other live services,
or if the game developers and art directors of the game tell you to go F yourself if you're a gamer, or if you're a white dude playing games. Let's be honest, all these things were said, especially in 2024. All these games that flopped, a lot of the people who were working on the game were straight up telling gamers are the worst people, white men aren't people, etc., etc. All of that was said publicly on their Twitter accounts by them.
do, but better, or just, new enough and fresh enough and executed well enough that people feel like they have to try this thing out, then, Bungie as a brand, as a studio, despite the pedigree that they have in the games industry, that name won't be enough to draw people to Marathon. And right now, really, you just can feel the general sense, both among hardcore fans of Bungie and among just your general gaming populace, that this game is just not quite it. You look at folks talking about why this game is not appealing to them and just how much it's getting in terms of interactions and upvotes. No proximity chat, no solo queues, so lacking in features that appeal to...
Oh yeah, A game like this, where you need to be able to communicate with people, having no proximity chat to tackle toxicity, is the most room temperature IQ I have heard in a long time. Hey guys, it's a PvP extraction shooter. No proximity chat though. That's too toxic.
Yo, what? Are they scared of people having open mics or something? Hearing like the dog barking in the background? Like, is that like the new toxicity?
I don't know what they're thinking, but I'm assuming they're not thinking at all.
Those who like to engage in multiplayer, and then lacking features for those who like to play live services in solo mode. No species of aliens that people liked from the original Marathon. No campaign. No personal customizable characters. No tension in an extraction shooter. Not listening to fans. A lot of people are just calling developers, or in particular leadership, I'd say.
For a game that's paywalled, this is a lot of limitations. Guys, aren't you excited to pay money for a game where there's no proximity chat, no solo queue? So you have to team up with people to play the game that you paid money for. No campaigns, because we saw how big of a success Overwatch 2 is after they lied about the campaign. So we thought, hell, why the fuck not? And you know what the best thing is? After you cannot queue up alone, and after you find out there's no campaigns, and after you find out you cannot even communicate with people in proximity chats, you cannot customize your character either. So how about it? Pay us money today.
Delusional. And that's not too far off from what developers at Bungie are saying. They're speaking to reporters to kind of say their piece about what it's like working at Bungie and working on Marathon. And even the developers don't seem to have much faith. Not only is morale in free fall, but the fact that they're almost an active rebellion by telling reporters, hey, things are not good within Bungie, with quotes like this. This is a former developer who spoke out on social media platforms like Blue Sky, saying, as a former Bungie employee who worked on Marathon, I feel for those still at the studio. Working with engineering, Marathon leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating. I won't speak about the rest, but Bungie leadership needs to be gutted completely. So that's somebody who spoke out on his own platform, but then
Shocker.
you've got some...
To be fair, Blue Sky was probably the worst place where he or she could have exposed all of this. Because when you expose that on Blue Sky, essentially you're gonna be the target because of the climate on that website.
Former and or current developers at Bungie who spoke to folks like Destin from IGN, who quoted employees saying the following on his channel: everything happening to Bungie is because of greed. Bungie's problems stem from a lack of player empathy, disconnected leadership, and a corporate-first structure. Internal language shifted from studio, games, and players to company, product.
I a little bit blame the player base for this, because for a long time, me included, we've been just giving them money just for a morsel of something. Like Destiny 2 DLCs. They were like $50-$60. I was one of the idiots who kept paying for those DLCs. And Bungie went, oh, well, we can add the stupidest thing ever, the most low effort thing, and we'll still get money, and these idiots will just eat it up.
Also removing content from the game too.
So to be fair, we collectively kinda encourage them to act this way toward us. But now there's a rude awakening for them, because the average player, like all of us, decided to go, hey, this kind of seems bad. I'd rather not spend my money on this. I'd rather buy the Dommy Mommy skin of Marvel Rivals.
And customers during the Sony acquisition. The fact that you've got folks like Paul Tassi being told by developers that feedback that was being relayed to leadership as far back as 5 years ago went unheard and often ignored. Or the fact that you've got Destin being told that Bungie feels like a cool kids club where you either agreed with leadership or were put on a list, berated publicly, and told your ideas didn't matter, with one ex-employee saying if they didn't think of it, it wasn't worth doing, so on and so forth. And you've got a situation where there's just no faith at all that Bungie can pull off Marathon, make it a successful product. and that it can stand the test of time. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on everything surrounding Marathon, what you think prospects look like for the game, and what you think the future holds for Bungie given the...
I think Bungie, either they'll be completely got it to like a maybe like 40-50 team, which would be probably the best decision for them. Or Sony will continue keeping them on life support, which by that point is like, why bother? Bungie is 100% a net negative for them.